She handed me off to men who continued to use me to kill and destroy, all before I had even kissed my first girl. My mother never said goodbye or explained where I was going. She never once let me believe that I had lived up to her expectations of me, or let me fool myself into believing that I had ever managed to honor the memory of my late father. The rest of the world hears words like Holy War, the Gaza Strip, the Promised Land, fundamentalist terrorism, infighting, genocide, and can turn on CNN or click on a link to see shaky footage of bombs dropping in the desert, but for me it was my day-to-day. I wasn't just part of a war. I was the war. A man with an American mother and an Arab father and no place that was mine. The men whom I was handed over to, basically a trained child soldier already with bodies and blood on his hands, tried to stoke the blind rage inside of me that my mother had ignited at birth. They tried to take all of the hostile and horrific teachings I learned at my mother's side and turn me into a machine that was fueled only by the need to fight for customs and country. They tried to fill me up with the same kind of fury that my mother had inside of her because of the loss of my father, who had sacrificed his life fighting for the supposedly right side. Always the cause. It was everything to these people, and nothing but words to me. To me, there was no right or wrong side. There was no promised land and hereditary right to the sand that blew everywhere and stung my skin. All I could see was the side with the highest body count and the side inflicting the most damage depending on what day it was. By the time I reached my mid-teens, I didn't want anything to do with any of it, and my loyalty to my mother and her cause was fractured enough that I was starting to see the world beyond it. I wanted to be a man, not a weapon. I was over it all, soul-sick and exhausted from living in a war zone, depleted from years of seeking my mother's approval, and then the acceptance and praise of the men who took me, all to no avail. Right at that moment when I was ready to surrender it all, give up myself for the only kind of peace I would ever know after all the horror I had created, the government came calling. More accurately, I fell into their hands when they stopped the loaded-down truck I was supposed to be protecting. A truck full of explosives and headed for a primary school in the UN compound. I didn't want to protect the truck. I didn't want to be where I was. I didn't want to be anything or anyone. I couldn't see any more people die in a war they had never asked to be part of. If Mossad hadn't intercepted us, the truck would have blown long before it arrived at the school grounds, taking me and the actual devotees to the cause with it. I had my hand on the trigger of a submachine gun and was beyond ready to use it. Kids were innocent in all of this, and there were lines, even then, that I would not cross. I wouldn't be used anymore, and I was finally ready to make a final and drastic stand. My plan was to die by my own hand and to take as many of the bastards that had used me, handled me, and controlled me with me on the way out. It was the only way I thought I would be free of the goddamn cause that hung around my neck like a fucking albatross. But then Mossad ambushed us, snatched me up from death's door, and offered me a chance to vanish if I stayed with the cell I was embedded in as a double agent for 5 more years. I took them up on the offer without much of a second thought. I had no loyalty left except to myself. I would dig up all the intel and turn it over with no qualms as long as I was guaranteed a way out. Gaining my freedom became my only goal. That was my new cause to fight for, my new objective, and I didn't care that it was entirely self-serving. All I wanted was out, and dropping bodies for a different, more organized, and better-funded organization made the most sense if they were going to give me an exit. They dangled the golden carrot in front of me, and I couldn't say no. Anonymity, freedom, forgiveness for every horrific crime.